Now, capital budgeting decisions require a manager to determine how much money to spend for future cash benefits, whether those cash benefits are either money's flowing into the firm or maybe we're saving money. But what if you were given the decision on how much to spend and how much the future cash flows are, and then we're asked what is the rate of return to the firm? We refer to this as the internal rate of return. Now, if we look, we have two projects on your screen, and Project A and Project B. Now, I'm asking the question, at what rate will NPV be zero, or these cash flows will equal exactly $1,000? At what rate that would be. Now, I'm not going to do this with longhand because longhand requires trial and error. If you take a look at this, I have to do it many different times. However, Excel and calculators will figure this out pretty quickly. And here, if you look, these are the answers that we have, but they were done longhand. I'm not, like I said, going to go through these. I'm going to go ahead and click here, and I'm going to do the first one on Excel. And Excel has a function referred to as IRR. And all I have to do is guess the values. Make sure the first one's negative, and I'm going to grab them and pull down here, and it now guessed at 16.8. I'll hit OK. And Excel loves a round on me, so let's go back here and round. There's 16.82, and there's the answer here. So what it's telling me is that this cash flow, these cash flows actually represent a 16.82% return. Now, earlier, we calculated as an NPV, and when we calculate as an NPV at 10%, let's go ahead and make this a 10%, delete, at 10%, we found that it was greater than 1,000. Actually, it was $134 greater, and that $134.08 represents the difference between the 10% and, of course, the 16.82%. We also determined that on the capital budgeting decision that this one returned less. Therefore, if this one returns less, however, still greater than 10% because it's greater than $1,000, we can go ahead and calculate that here as well. I'm going to go ahead and grab this fill bar here and pull across. So it's telling me the internal rate of return here is 13.28. So given the two projects, since Project A has a greater return or adds more to the value of the firm, we would pick Project A versus Project B. Now, I've got some calculators here. Most of your business calculators will have a function referred to as IRR. For instance, let me pull this one up here. IRR is on this calculator right. If I could find it, there it is. There's IRR. So all you have to do is add in each cash flow, making sure the first one is negative and the future ones are all positive, and you can get the IRR, internal rate of return, as well. So this number will drive that back to zero. So if I were to put that number in as negative and then these in as positive, and that rate of return in the calculator, it'll give me the NPV back to zero, because that's kind of what it's saying here. Now, I want to also discuss something, maybe a better measurement of internal rate of return is something called modified internal rate of return. And it does have advantages over, and I'll talk about those in a minute, but let's first just calculate this one. I want to stay away from longhand again. Let's look at, I'm spending $1,000 so that I can either make or save these cash flows, and I've got a 10% rate here that I can evaluate. We'll call, I'm going to leave that 10% off for right now. Don't really need it. So the question is, what is the modified internal rate of return? Well, the modified internal rate of return is a little bit more difficult to calculate. The first thing I have to do is find out how much the future value of these cash flows are worth, or in essence, what I'm saying here is at 10%, what is, and let's take a look, we got 500 here, and we've got 400 here, and we got 300 here, and we've got 100 here, and we're saying we're spending $1,000 for this. And the question becomes, what is the modified internal rate of return? Well, what I have to do is I have to take this and I have to shoot this out over 10%. So basically I'm saying $500 3 times. And then I have to do it again here for this one, $400. So what I'm actually calculating is, I'm going to do this one again here, $300. I'm calculating something referred to as net future value. This was 3. Oh, I'm sorry, that was 2, and this would be 1. And then I just have to add 100 to it. And once I add all these up, I get the net future value. Then I can kind of compare whatever this number is here to this number here. So it's a kind of a tedious calculation. So that's why I always say that Excel makes light work of it. So if I come here and I click here, I can easily go to Finance and FV, and I can find the future value of this. And there's the rates, 10%, and there's 3 periods, and payment is 0, and there's my PV is -500. And I made it a negative number so that makes my future value positive, so I can add them all up. And like I said before, if I grab the fill bar, I can do the next 2 here. So I've got all 3 of them. And if I click here, I can go ahead and just say, I want the summation of all of these, because I'm summing them up. So let's go back to home. Oh, there's a auto sum. Let me move larger here. So I found that the terminal value, if you will, is $1579.50, or the future value of these cash flows. Now if I can compare it to my initial one here, I'll get the modified internal rate of return. So let's take a look at just for the fun of it, let me go ahead and do IRR, and I'll put my MIRR right here. So if I were to do the IRR, I go to formulas, and I go to finance, and I can just go to IRR, and here's my values and my guess. Click, and I can see that about 14.48, and of course Excel loves to. Now let me compare that to my MIRR. How do I do that one? Well, I'm going to place it right here. I'm going to do it longhand. Longhand, not that I'm going to click on the formulas, but I'm just going to find the do a little differently with the formula here, finance. What I'm looking for is the rate of difference between over my 4 periods. So I'm going to type in a 4, because there's 4 cash flows. Pull this back over here. See, this would be 0, that'd be 1, that'd be 2, that'd be 3, that'd be 4. And I'm going to put a 0 here for payment. And I'm going to put the present value as the -1,000. And the future value would be my net future value, which was the $1579.50. And I get the modified internal rate of return here. Let me go ahead and now you can see here's the IRR, here's the modified IRR. Now let me pull down here and give you some advantages of the modified. Well, modified IRR has 2 advantages over the internal rate of return. See, the IRR assumes that the cash flows can be reinvested at that initial IRR, whereas the modified internal rate of return assumes the reinvestment rate to be at weighted average cost of capital or another rate. MIRR also eliminates the multiple IRR issue. So in conclusion, for independent projects, all 3 should be used. When I say all 3, I mean the NPV, the IRR, and MIRR. Now, net present value works best, and MIR is better than the IRR. So I would always do the NPV first, and then if I'm going to do IRR, I always look at my modified IRR instead of my internal IRR, my internal rate of return.